Welcome to Women Who Walk. I'm Louise Ross, writer and author of Women Who Walk the book, the inspiration for this podcast. And just as I did for the book, here I'll be interviewing and unpacking the journeys of impressive, intrepid women who've made multiple international moves for work, for adventure, for love, for freedom, reminding us that women can do extraordinary things. You can find a transcript with pictures to each episode and my books on my website, louiseross.com. Hello listeners, welcome to episode 18 of Women Who Walk. My guest today is Ina Rothmann. Born in 1983 in the tiny country of Moldova, which at the time was still part of the Soviet Union, Ina was in primary school when in 1991 the Soviet Union collapsed. Having studied at a school where classes were conducted in a number of different languages, she eventually went on to graduate from university with a degree in English, French, and Spanish language and literature. Immediately thereafter, she started working as a librarian and a Spanish and English as a second language teacher at the only international school in Moldova. 6 years later, she moved temporarily to Germany for additional studies and a career change, specifically country director for a financial services project set up to help Moldovans with financial planning, a service that was relatively new to a country that was just 30 years independent of the Soviet Union and where people had a history of not trusting financial and governmental institutions. During a winter holiday in Turkey, Ina met her South African husband. They married that same year, settling in Moldova. But within a few months, they moved to Dubai for her husband's work. It was in Dubai that Ina started writing, online copywriting mainly. Her writing for fashion and beauty magazines led to her first self-published book, Cleaning the Closet: How a New Style Can Change Your Lifestyle. 4 years later, and back in Moldova, during the pandemic lockdown, she and a friend co-authored a book on expat life titled Surviving COVID-19 in a Foreign Land: Stories of Expats and Migrants Around the World. A year later, in August 2021, she published her third book, Multiversed: Poems of Dreams and Reality, a poetry collection inspired by her interest in quantum physics. A month after its release, Ina and her husband moved to the UK, driving through Europe en route to southern England, arriving just a few months ago in September. And so today I'm speaking with Ina from her home in West Sussex. Welcome, Ina. Thank you so much for being on Women Who Walk today. Now, you're from Moldova, and I think it's fair to say that most listeners probably are not that aware of this landlocked country in Eastern Europe. Though that said, it's increasingly a popular travel destination. But can you tell us a bit about where you grew up? Perhaps describe your neighborhoods, some memorable scenes from your childhood.
Moldova is a very small country. Currently, its population is about 3 million people. During Soviet times, it was more like 4 million people. With lots of sunshine. There's lots of sunshine in our small country. Statistically, we have about 300 sunny days a year, maybe even more.
Really?
Yes.
That's a little like Miami.
Temperatures are not like Miami. We have harsh
No.
winters, but it will be sunny winters. Maybe that's the reason why people in Moldova are so laid back and content with their life despite all the hardships we had to go through, despite our complicated history. Moldova really has been independent only for the last 30 years. Before, it was always under someone's rule. It was Turkey, it was Tsarist Russia, it was Romania, it was Soviet Union. So it's been on its own only for the past 30 years, as I said. And growing in the 90s, when it became independent, wasn't easy, to be honest. There was frequent load shedding, electricity being cut off. There was no gas, sometimes no water, very high crime rates, mass poverty. I remember a really cold winter one year, and as a teenager getting ready for a piano exam, wearing wool gloves, because otherwise my fingers wouldn't move. That's how cold it was. It might get up to -20 sometimes. Despite all that, I have warm memories of my childhood. Maybe thanks to all the misery going on around you, you build stronger human connection, you value relationships more. And my childhood friends became my friends for life. We're still in touch, even though everyone's scattered around the world. That was the environment I grew up in. Moldova really is very different nowadays. And as you said, there's some new interests from people from all over the world as a new travel destination. That might be also thanks to wine. Moldova really is a big wine producer despite its size. We are number 12, I think, in wine exporters in the world. We have 245 wineries. That's basically a winery per 10,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there a particular type of wine that's the speciality of Moldova?
Red, white, normal wines, ice wine. We have the largest wine cellars in the world. They're so huge, those wine cellars, that you drive your car in them. It's like a city with streets having names like Chardonnay and Merlot.
You drive underground.
Yes, because it's huge.
Was it something else before?
It was wine cellars. You know, their first man in space is a Russian man, Yuri Gagarin. He actually visited one of these wine cellars, and in the book, in the wine cellar, he wrote entrance, let's say, Monday and exits Wednesday. It's been here for 2 days.
So, do you think that that is in part then why people go to Moldova, to do wine tours of the cellars and to taste the wines
That's a
and experience?
really, really nice bonus. Wine is quite good and it's quite cheap compared to other wines in Europe. And the food is really good as well. It's a very rural country, so you have fresh farm markets everywhere, fresh dairy, meats, vegetable, fruits, and it's really high quality. Now we're living in England and I go to the supermarket, sometimes I want to cry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the way you've described Moldova, it sounds a little like Portugal. Kind of rustic, wonderful wine industry, world class, in fact, and the wines are very cheap and it's very rural still. So a lot of really good quality fruits and vegetables and grass-fed meats and so on.
We're landlocked though, so we don't have beach.
That's right, you are landlocked. Romania on one side, Ukraine on one side.
Yes. Actually, during Soviet times, we had some access to the beach. But then in all the chaos of 1990s, when everyone became independent, we somehow lost it to Ukraine.
Those borders keep shifting in Eastern and Central Europe.
Yeah, true.
So you went to a school with many classes in English, but that seems unusual for a country that was under Soviet rule. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It is very unusual. I'm not sure how that was possible. The Soviet educational system put lots of emphasis on science, on subjects like mathematics, physics, chemistry. Those subjects were way more important than humanitarian subjects, philosophy and languages. And then in 1980s, someone in Ministry of Education of Soviet Union, I suspect, decided that we need some projects in humanitarian area. And somehow my school was picked for this project. It was one of the few schools that were picked for that. It was privilege luck. It's some interesting coincidence, but that's how it happened. We had English, German, French subjects, literature, of course, some subjects of like history, geography, or in English. But after Moldova became an independent country, the school even made quickly some connections with various foreign NGOs and projects. And we had native speaking volunteers come and teach in the school as well. We were quite privileged to experience that.
So in effect, you had quite an international education.
Yes, that's true.
And then an aptitude for languages too, learning them and teaching them, because you went on to teach.
Yes, I did. Yes.
But then you made a country move and a career change. What were the circumstances around these changes?
It was a one-year project teaching Moldovans how to use financial institutions. So I was teaching in an international school for 6 years. And then I had some sort of epiphany, realizing that that's it. This is my life. This is how my life's going to be. This is as far as I can go career-wise. I felt like I reached my full potential as a teacher. After 5 years of teaching in the school, I ended up teaching a whole bunch of subjects. English as a second language, library, Spanish, Russian, Romanian, assistant for mathematics. I was master of all trades. It was extraordinarily rewarding experience because children are amazing at expressing their gratitude, especially little kids. They run to you, Messina, Messina, I love you. And that's really, really wonderful experience to be a teacher. But I decided it was time to move on. A friend of mine asked me if I would be interested in leading a financial educational project. Yeah, sure. I signed up for some courses, project management, to get some theoretical knowledge of what is expected of me. And I just started working and learning as I went.
You did this additional training in Germany?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then it took you back to Moldova.
Yes, yes. Actually, that change made me realize that Western culture is based on identifying yourself with your job, with what you do. In fact, you are free to do anything you want, and even if it's from a different domain, you can try that and you can try something else. It's okay to have multiple interests and not limit yourself to just one area. Later, I read a book. It's called Refuse to Choose by Barbara Sher, about people who have multiple interests and how it's frowned upon in the West. But it's okay to not be doing the same thing for the rest of your life.
Indeed. Actually, young people need to be flexible today because nothing is permanent. And flexibility is so important. So you almost need to be a jack of all trades, as you mentioned that you felt that you were. And then you started working in this new field?
Yes, yes. It was a one-year project teaching Moldovans how to use financial institutions. As I mentioned, we don't have this history of banking and finance. Everything was decided for you previously when we were part of the Soviet Union. You didn't have to take any responsibility or make really any financial decisions. Majority of people still store cash. It's called under the mattress.
So you were in a advising role, trying to build trust in your clients, trying to help clients build trust in financial institutions.
Yes, as well as teaching people how to manage their finances. For many people, it was brand new information that you have 2 months of your expenses saved for emergencies, for example, or that you have to budget sometimes.
But then there was a shift again in your life's direction because you were holidaying in Turkey when you met your South African husband, and then there was a move to South Africa. So what was that country move like for you? I mean, I imagine it was so different from your experience in Central and Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I visited a few countries before meeting my husband. And they were all in Europe, different but similar in a way. And going to South Africa was like going to a completely different world. It is a very developed country, but it's definitely not a European country. You can't really walk anywhere. You rely a lot on your car. There's very limited public transportation. I felt a little bit constricted because I can't just go out and promenade on the streets and wander around. You have to have a destination and you drive there. South Africans, they love huge spaces. They have big houses, lots of land, big distances between neighborhoods. They're so used to large spaces that it's a big culture shock for South Africans when they move to Europe.
Maybe a culture shock for you moving there.
Yeah, I don't mind big spaces, but I'd rather stay, for example, in a small studio apartment in the middle of Paris than in a huge house in the middle of nowhere that takes you maybe an hour to drive anywhere.
Sounds like you're an urban person. You like an urban experience. So then there was another move, and where did you go next?
We went to Dubai for my husband's work. First, from South Africa, we moved back to Moldova. My husband also wanted to leave South Africa. He was actually planning to leave, and then he met me, and it was easy to make a choice which country to go to. And then we moved to Dubai, where we stayed for a few years.
And you had another career change in Dubai. So tell us about that.
I wouldn't even call it a career change. I would call it just trying new things. I started writing, not as a hobby, but as a job. I always liked writing, and I never considered it to be a serious occupation. I used it to travel. I would come across some conferences or some competitions or some events, and you had to write an essay to participate. So I would write an essay. It wouldn't take me long, and I would win some sort of a free trip to the event/conference. Basically, end up getting a free trip to a new place and meeting new interesting people, and also some educational experience.
Very positive.
Yeah. And then in Dubai, I had all this free time suddenly. Also, you're in a new place and you don't really know anyone yet. I decided to start doing something from the comfort of my home. I went to the first freelancer website I found and looked at the jobs. Writing was such an obvious, easy choice for me that I started applying to all these jobs and just started writing.
So you were mostly writing for online publications, is that right?
That's correct. I was writing for all sorts of online publications: beauty, fashion, sports, some politics. There was even some random gambling articles I had to write about. And I know nothing about gambling, just had to do some research.
That was going to be my question. There's such diverse topics, I guess, then that you just had to do a lot of research in order to write this
Yes,
article.
some of them were easy to write because I had some personal interest and knowledge about some things. But some articles I had to do some research, of course, and come up with something that makes sense.
And then in Dubai, you published your first book, which then led to your second book, and then your recent publication of poems. And this is fascinating to me because, from what I understand, your poems were inspired by quantum physics. Did you study quantum physics at school, or was this another research project in order to write this book?
You can't really study quantum physics in school because you need lots of solid foundation of calculus physics and calculus-based physics and linear algebra. It's a bit too complicated to study in school. But as an adult, you can just get familiar with some basic concepts.
What are some basic concepts?
Very basic level, quantum physics predicts very strange and peculiar things about how matter works. And it contradicts how things work, how we perceive them to work. For example, in physics, we have waves, we have particles. in traditional physics. In quantum physics, particles sometimes behave like particles and sometimes they behave like waves, completely at odds with how they expected to behave. Basically, the foundation of quantum physics, things behave the way you don't expect them to behave. And you should just forget all the preconceptions you had about how our world is and open your mind.
And then how did these basic ideas translate for you into poetry?
My poetry book is not necessarily just about quantum. It's about my perceptions and feelings about the world in general, and not necessarily outside worlds, your internal universe as well. And when I read some reviews that the readers leave, I realize that there are multiple levels to my book, and people see different things in it and discover some different concepts that they can relate to. It's multi-leveled piece of work. It is based a little bit in quantum. So don't expect anything concrete. Open your mind and look what you can see with an open mind.
I think poetry is the perfect vehicle for that because it's interpretive, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Sometimes I'm not sure when I look back at some poems, like what is this? What did they want to say?
I actually read an interview you had given to one of my former guests. Andrea has a website and she interviews writers. And you revealed something in your interview with Andrea. You said that your first book, you look back at it and you're not that satisfied with it. Perhaps that's typical for a writer. As we reflect on our previous work, we always see the errors in our work and imagine that it could have been better.
No, the first book is a bad book. As a person who reads a lot.
What was your first book about?
Fashion, beauty. I just basically compiled some articles about fashion and beauty and put it together.
Okay.
There was no soul in it, but it was a good experience to try self-publish a piece of work.
Is it Kindle Direct Publishing on Amazon that you use?
That's correct. I've used that, yeah.
Yeah, me too, actually. It's a great platform. And then your second book?
Second book, I co-authored with a very good friend of mine. It's expat experiences during COVID times. So we tried to record them in the beginning of the pandemic, interviewed 10 people from all over the world and put the short stories together in a book.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a couple of stories from that book to give us a sense of how people around the world have coped?
The story I could relate to is expat from Dubai that was in America visiting her family and with her husband. Then they heard that the borders were closed, so they flew back to Dubai through the UK, and then from the UK they couldn't get back home to Dubai. So they ended up staying in the UK for a few months, trying to wait till this is over and they're allowed back home.
You could identify with that because something similar happened to you?
I could identify with that because I lived in Dubai, I know how it works. You can expect anything and you don't really have any power to change the way things work. And you can't complain about it. You just have to be patient and wait.
So were you back in Moldova when you and your colleague conducted the interviews and put this book together?
I was in Moldova and my colleague, she was in the UK. She lives in the UK. We did everything online, of course. She's a researcher and I'm always up for something interesting, something to keep me busy when you were just sitting at home, waiting for something that you don't even know when it's going to happen.
That's right. I did the same thing. You get creative when you're kind of stuck and you can't go anywhere or even go out of your house. So now when you were back in Moldova, you joined the International Women's Club. Was it your experiences of living in several different countries that drew you to then get involved in the international community?
Yes, it was. I was a repatriating expat. It's actually a thing to go back to your home country when everything feels and looks different and you don't feel like you belong anymore and you don't feel like you're the same person anymore, and people around you, they just still stuck in their old ways and you're looking for like-minded people that can understand and relate to what you're going through. Expat women, it's always a great community in any country of the world. In Moldova, it's called International Women's Club of Moldova. It was natural for me to join almost instantly. I reached out to a community that I was familiar with, especially considering my husband's an expat. We have a group of international friends anywhere we go. We don't necessarily make friends, for example, with Moldovan families or with South African families. It will be families from all over the world.
It's the same here in Portugal. I'm part of International Women in Portugal. You have common stories. You have a lot that you can share and talk about with those women.
We also did charity work, lots of charity work, helping underprivileged communities of women and children. You build more meaningful connections through helping others.
You do, that's right. You can connect with the larger community through these organisations and be of support where it's needed. And then this most recent move, I'm sure it's still fresh because it was a few months ago, and these country moves can be kind of challenging and exciting. So how are you getting on in the UK?
Difficult to say. I have very mixed feelings. You know, they say there are 4 stages to move in countries. There is honeymoon, there is frustration, there is adjustment, and there is acceptance. Either we're in the honeymoon stage that's been going through waves of frustration and adjustment, or we're already on acceptance. We've been here for 2 months, and our honeymoon lasted for 1 week until we had to start looking for a house. The house market is complicated. Houses can be very different depending on your location. That was a whole week of frustration. We got frustrated so much we both got sick. That might have been our bodies adjusting to the environment, so it could have been adjustment. Actually, now it's been 2 months and I'm quite happy and content finally. So could it be our acceptance stage? I don't know. We live in a very beautiful region. It's West Sussex, quite close to the sea, and there's beautiful nature reserves around, lots of history, lots of art, culture. It's a very pleasant town. I really like it. Am I confusing acceptance with prolonged honeymoon, or what's next?
Well, that was going to be my question. What's next? Do you see another creative project, perhaps some more writing?
I do. I bought a desk for my office room just a week ago, and I'm looking forward to using it as a place for my laptop. I have a few ideas, but I'm not sure if I will implement them, because sometimes you just start writing something and then your writing takes a completely different direction. And
can you share a little something, an idea?
Yes, I can share that I'm looking forward to writing a book of short stories.
Oh, that would be different from your other work.
Yes.
Well, Ina, thank you so much for your time today. This has been quite a journey through several countries and the evolution of your writing and the work that you do. If listeners would like to connect with you online, where can they find you and your books?
They can find me on Instagram. It's Uncover This World. There are links to my work there.
So I will link to your Instagram page in the transcript to this episode. And again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening today. And so you don't miss future episodes with more impressive, intrepid women, do subscribe on your favorite podcast provider or on my YouTube channel, Women Who Walk Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review Women Who Walk on either Apple or Podchaser. I've linked to them both in the transcript of this episode on my website, louiseross.com.